Good evening, everyone. The Durham Public Schools budget hearing is now in session. At this time, we wish to extend a warm welcome to everyone who is joining us. The purpose of this meeting is to inform our parents, staff, and constituents about the work aligned with our mission to embrace, educate, and empower every student to innovate, serve, and to lead. We'll be focusing that attention on the budget tonight. The interpreters are Martha Romo Iguiles and Marty Ramirez. Thank you for taking the time to join us. So the first item on our agenda is the agenda review and approval.
Move approval.
Second.
It's been moved and properly second. Any other discussion? All of those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, please use the same sign. Passes unanimously.
Do we need a roll call vote with
Oh, yes, we do.
Alexandra?
My next statement was going to be, we do have one of our board members who is joining us virtually today, Alexandra Valladares. And so we will do a roll call vote on that agenda item. We'll start with you, Ms. Valladares.
Hi, everyone. I'm here at a conference for Migrant Education. I vote aye.
Thank you, Ms. Byer.
I vote aye. Thank you.
Mr. Raven,
Aye.
Ms. Lewis,
Aye.
Mr. Sears.
Aye.
And the chair votes aye as well. Passes unanimously. The next item on our agenda is public comment. We have one person who signed up, Millicent Rogers. Before we get started, Millicent, you can come on in, Ms. Rogers. Here are the rules for public comment. Submitted public comments will be read out loud during the public comment period, and board members will listen carefully. Though for those that are submitted online, for those who are in person, please state your name. If you're speaking for an organization, please state your name and the name of the organization. Speakers are asked to present their comments in a specified time. We'll ask for 3 minutes. When the yellow light comes on, you have 1 minute left to start winding up your remarks. When the red light comes on, it will beep, which indicates your time is up. Complaints about named staff, students, or parents should not be voiced in open session. However, we are interested in hearing your concerns with regard to the public education, safety of students, or to the operations of the school system. Finally, the board members will listen carefully and consider comments, but we do not engage in a discussion with speakers. Millicent Rogers, you may speak.
Hi, everybody. I'm Millicent Rogers, and I'm speaking on behalf of myself. I am back to thank the staff again for the budget that they put together and presented, but to make sure that you're remembering that our nutritional assistants and instructional assistants and other classified staff are looking for that same pay increase that bus drivers got earlier this year. And they want it now, as they should have it, but we also need to make sure that our students have enough people in the building come fall to serve them and to make sure that educators don't remain overwhelmed. I'm not going to take up any more of your time. I just want to remind you to go back to at least that $17 an hour for those folks. Okay, have a great night.
Thank you, Ms. Rogers. That is the only person who signed up for in-person public comment. Oh, yes, okay. Mr. Sutter, did we have any online public comment for the budget hearing? All right, he's shaking his head, so it says no. Next, we'll go to our presentation on the budget.
Good evening, Madam Chair, board members, Dr. Mabenga. Staff. Tonight, we come to you for this budget hearing just to hit some highlights of where we are, where we're headed, but not take a lot of your time in that regard. As we know, we have brought this to you a few times. You've seen it with the county commissioners as well. That ask has not changed. We have not received anything from the state that would make it change at this point in time. So we'll just move along quickly. I won't spend a lot of time on the slides. Just wanted to point out that our average daily membership, we're projecting here in Durham Public Schools that we're going to have 31,620 students. That's what we're using for our allotments to start off with. We did receive the allotments from the state as far as our ADM for the year. ADM is always lower, but that's at 31,305. So we're benefiting the schools to ensure that they have what they need to get started with. Next slide. We're just going to move to the next slide, please. So the real highlight of this budget presentation is in regards to the salary supplements that you're looking to ask the county commissioners for the purpose of certified staff, moving it from a beginning of 5,675 to 4,500. Ah. Good one. I didn't even see the yellow light. Anyway, but that's really the key is this, the majority of this ask that is from that standpoint is primarily for that. That's the one largest request in this budget. Again, Chapel Hill, Wake County are bringing their budgets forward. They're going to have some changes to their salary supplements as well. We'll have to see how that plays out because they're just going, I do believe, tonight to talk about it in Chapel Hill. But from this standpoint, that's your largest item. If we can just go a few slides more, I just wanted to point, back one. I didn't think it came that quick. So in the green area, that is our daily operating expenses as far as the needs for the salary increases, classified and certified 2.5% next year. The state has approved it in their 2-year budget. And then we're asking for the $1 million that we increase the bus drivers to backfill that push that you all made to ensure that we had staff in place to transport kids all year. The other items are the ones that get us the best. It's the hospital insurance and retirement rates continually going up. That's almost $1.8 million, $9 million that is going to be needed just for that, those two items themselves. And then our other operating costs for utilities and things of that nature. That comes out to be 5.3. The next one was the 4 million that I mentioned on the previous page. And then for the salary supplements, it starts at 6,500 and tops out about 11,725 for a bachelor's salary scale implementation. As we move down to the next item, this is where we are asking for the Lions Farm increases. We need operational costs to get them started. And we have in there 1 AP. We have some salary administrative staff, as well as custodial staff costs that we need to have in place so we do not have to eat into the current budget that we have. And then, of course, with ESSER funding, we have 13 tech assistants working with us with the one-to-one initiative. And we're asking the county to provide us 7 of those positions coming up this year for a little over $500,000 for those 7 positions to be implemented. That is to ensure as we move forward, we have guaranteed money in the budget to keep that at least 7 in place. And as we phase out the ESSER funding, we'll ask the county for the remainder in next budget cycle. So overall, we're asking for $10.3 million. Of course, we know the cost of a charter school is almost 20% of whatever dollar we get from the county. So that's another 2.575 that we're asking for the total of the ask, $12,875,000. Are there any questions in regards to the budget ask? Yes, sir.
Thank you for this. My question was in regards to the 2.5%. I believe you stated that the state is funding. Are they funding both the certified and the classified 2.5%?
Yes, both are 2.5% increases.
And explain to me also how that works for, like, I know that you all mentioned before how we have a ratio of how many assistant principals that the state funds. So we, the district, have to kind of absorb that cost. that 2.5% doesn't go towards those type of positions. Is that correct?
It does.
Oh, it does?
They're part of the certified
Okay,
positions.
okay.
So this is your local ask for the local positions that we have in place. The state will cover their share of those certified salary.
That's good to know.
increases.
Thank you.
Just be reminded that whenever the state funds us, they don't fund us at 100% of whatever they approve because the money comes to us in formulas. And usually we don't get the funding that's needed, so it gets pushed down to local funds to absorb as well.
So that brings up one other question. The way that was worded, I'm wondering if there are vacant positions at the time of the request, is that still funded for the 2.5% as well?
Yes, we have those in as part of the calculation to ensure that we receive the needed funding if all positions were filled.
Thank you again.
Are there any other questions from board members? Ms. Byer?
Oh, thank you, Mr. Lazar. I really appreciate all the work that you all have done on this, and I know we've gone through it quickly, and but it's really important work. When you all are calculating the charter school projections for next year, are you also taking into account the expansion of KIP into the elementary grades?
We always include an additional bump on those schools because we know that they can continue to grow. I think they're coming in with their 8th grade this year from that standpoint. And I think that's the last year of their implementation.
Yeah, I think they're adding an advertising for a new elementary school opening in Durham. So I believe that we might check into some of what's going on that campus as they're adding. They've been a middle grade school, but I believe they're adding elementary next year as well.
Yes, as soon as we hear something from the state, that becomes another number that gets put into our calculations.
And are you looking for feedback? You just really wanted public comment and
This-
folks
yeah,
can
this was really
continue to
about
comment in the
Public
coming.
comment.
Yeah, great. Thank you all for your work.
So I had a question. I think some other districts have started putting out their budgets this week. So I wanted to know if you all had time to do the analysis on teacher supplement and where our proposal will land with those new kind of budgets coming out. I know they also just came out recently.
We've heard from Wake County that they're going to land just below us, but their higher end might increase above us. And that's just part of the current calculations they have in place right now. So I think Chapel Hill is looking to go up another 2% to 3% overall. And so that's going to put us very close when those calculations come in. But I did see that this morning.
Thank you. Any other questions from board members? Mr. Raven?
One last question, because I feel like I remember seeing it last year, but I'm not seeing it up here now. And maybe we've kind of encapsulated that into another part of the budget. But we used to account for, I guess, what is the replacement cost for all the laptops that we have since we're doing that 1-to-1? Is that something that we're absorbing into the budget directly so it doesn't necessarily need to be shown on here? Because I know that seems like that's something that could get pricey year after year with 30,000+ laptops.
So right now, we're still using our ESSER funding
Okay.
to cover those replacements as we go along and have some left in the budget for that purpose. We were using it between the hotspots that we still have budgeted for that have dropped off precipitously this year compared to 2 years ago. So from that standpoint, we're in a good place with having some additional funds to support the refresh on those.
So it sounds like that means for this upcoming school year, we'll be good to go. And then next school year will be, that following school year will be 23-24. That will be the last year that we'll have access to that funding, like halfway through that year. So in that subsequent years is when we'll kind of have to put that back on the table.
Correct. We'll
Right.
start looking at that. I think we have them for 3 years in our refresh program.
Right.
And as you well know, we replaced close to $7 million worth or implemented $7 million worth of laptops that first year.
Thank you.
Ms. Byer.
Yeah, thank you. I hope that when we discuss this again in 2 weeks, that we might have a proposal just to cost out. I know we have what it would take to get our folks to 17. I think that's just so critical. I wanted to put in this space that Duke's just announced as of July, their minimum wage is going up to 17 an hour. That's where this market is. I know that Wake is looking and moving their folks up. I'm glad to see this has built in for bus drivers to actually, instead of starting at 17, starting at 1743. Like, I think we've got this salary study coming, and I think we need both, and we can't wait on wages for these folks. They won't be here halfway through the year. So I look forward to really robust discussions with this board on that as we go forward. And I thank you all for all the work that you're doing.
You're welcome.
Any other questions from board members?
Yes, I just had a comment about the information technology, the 7 workstation technicians. I'm really happy about that. And, you know, it's been echoed about our needs for IT. My question with this department having $500,000, a little over $500,000 of budget, what else is going to go into it more than just hardware? And I guess just obviously their expertise and technology. I'm wondering, and this is a conversation that I've had, including with colleagues here on the board, about digital equity and how we can build something along the lines of digital equity, so that our professionals who are in IT can also understand some of the gaps that we're in terms of our system addressing, you know, where families are at. It's not the family's gap, but it's more of our gap in terms of where we're moving digitally, and some of the ways that this department with $500,000 can keep in mind, you know, the communities that we serve, ways to be, you know, to have the trainings that are needed in terms of not just knowing and having the expertise in the IT world, but also like being able to navigate, you know, the conversations, community members, with families, with students, with staff along the lines of IT. And I'm just wondering if this is just a start to this, and we're hoping to have digital equity as a focus for this, or if this is something that's going to live across multiple departments. But I'd really like to see a focus on digital equity.
I'm going to have to pass on that one in its entirety. I'll let Dr. Mbenga take that one.
I gave your son, Mr. LeSure, you did not get it. Ms. Faraday is well noted. And I think as we are all embarking to this one-to-one initiative, we got to keep in mind, we also have a department that in academic departments responsible for integration of technology as well. I think we really wanted to start with hardware, make sure that we have those positions, that we have enough funds with SR funds, but we really wanted to go to county commissioner to start funding those technicians. As we're moving forward, if we're gonna need additional positions in academic department to make sure that our families and making sure that we are really bringing them to make sure that they're feeling comfortable with those devices, we will not hesitate to come and bring those positions forward. I think we're moving in the right direction, making sure that 7 positions are put up there with county commission to fund those. Then next year, we're gonna bring the other 6. Along the way, as we have other needs in different departments, we're going to look at our existing budget to try to really move funds around to make sure that some all other needs are also met. So if I can summarize myself, well noted. We don't want our folks not just to have devices and not be able to navigate those devices as well.
Thank you, Dr. Mbenga.
Just to add one piece of clarity to this, because if anybody's at home, they may not have missed this, but the 7 workstation technicians to phase in local support of one-to-one initiative, that's only staff, that's only just personnel costs, right? And even out of that, I'm assuming that you all probably are factoring like 30 to 40% of that cost is probably benefits. So maybe almost close to 200,000 of that is just the benefits. So that's really $300,000. That's for the 7 new positions that we're trying to hire. Correct?
That is correct.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions? This will conclude our budget hearing. Thank you so much, Mr. LeSueur. Board, let's take a 5-minute break and we can start, or maybe let's do 9 minutes, so we start at 5:30 for our work session. Thank you.
Everyone, the Durham Public School Board of Education work session is now in session. At this time, we wish to extend a warm welcome to everyone who is joining us this evening. The purpose of this meeting is to inform our parents, staff, and constituents about the work aligned with our mission to embrace, educate, and empower every student to innovate, serve, and lead. Tonight, the administration will be presenting information to keep you up to date on our strategic plan. The interpreter for tonight is Martha Romo Irgilis and Marty Ramirez, and thank you for taking the time to join us tonight. All right. We will now move to the second item of our agenda, which is to have a moment of silence, please. Thank you. All right, thank you. So item 3 on our agenda is the agenda review and approval. Board members, are there amendments that need to be made to the agenda?
Move approval of the agenda as presented.
I'll second.
All right. It has been moved and properly second that we approve the agenda as presented. Any discussion? If not, we will do a roll call vote. Ms. Valladares,
Aye, I vote aye.
Ms. Byer,
Aye.
Ms. Umstead,
Aye.
Ms. Lewis,
Aye.
Mr. Lee,
Aye.
Mr. Sears.
Aye.
My name is Frederick and I vote aye as well. It is approved unanimously. We will now go to the next item, which will be the board work session minutes. All right, and all the board members should have had the opportunity and time to review it. The
Move approval of the work session minutes dated
Second.
March 10th.
It has been moved and properly seconded that we approve the work session minutes. We'll go ahead and go with a roll call vote. Ms. Valladares,
I vote aye.
Ms. Byer,
Aye.
Ms. Umstead,
Aye.
Ms. Lewis,
Aye.
Mr. Lee,
Aye.
Mr. Sears.
Aye.
My name is Frederick. I vote aye as well. It passes unanimously. And we will now move to the public comment section. We do recognize that the agenda noted that it would actually be beginning at 6 p.m. So what we'll do is we will accept our public comment speakers now. And at 6 o'clock, we will circle back. If we have any additional public comment speakers, we'll go ahead and allow them to speak and use the balance of that time for the online comments. So we will go ahead and begin with our first speaker. But before we do that, allow me to read the public comment rules. Submitted public comments will be read aloud during the public comment period, and the board members will listen carefully and consider the comments. A quick review of the rules. First, please state your name. If speaking for an organization, please state your name and the name of the organization. Second, speakers are asked to present their comments in a specified time, usually 3 minutes. When a yellow light comes on, you have 1 minute left to start winding up your remarks. When the red light comes on, it will beep, which indicates your time is up. Complaints about named staff, students, or parents should not be voiced in open session. However, we are very interested in hearing your concerns with regard to public education, safety of students, or to the operation of the school system. Finally, the board members will listen carefully and consider the comments, but we do not engage in a discussion with speakers. Our first speaker name is Maximilian Matthews.
Good evening.
If you can
Um,
keep your mask up for us, please. Thank you.
Say it again.
Your mask.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's okay.
Good evening. My name is Maximilian Matthews. I'm a Durham native. I'm here representing Safe Schools NC. We are an organization that advocates for LGBTQ plus youth. I attended Parkwood Elementary, Lowe's Grove Middle, and Hillside High School. And I was with Durham Public Schools from 1991 to 2004. And the entire time that I was there, I saw no examples of queerness. I couldn't read about queer authors in my English class. I didn't learn about queer figures in my history class. To my knowledge, none of my staff, administrators, or teachers were trained to serve a student like me. But you all have the power to do something about that. You know, across the country, we are seeing anti-queer bills. Florida, Oklahoma, Idaho, and even today, Alabama, I believe, passed a bill. But I'm urging the board to please be proactive in your services to LGBTQ+ students by implementing training so that staff can be trained on how to serve such students, and also implementing LGBTQ+ related items in curriculum so that in a developmentally appropriate way that K-12 students can learn about such issues. So I just wanted to share my story in the hopes that you all will remember that as you endeavor to hopefully better serve LGBTQ+ students. Thank you for your time.
Our next speaker will be Dean Fitzgerald.
Good evening. I know that the people who oppose gender inclusive school policies come from a place of fear and misunderstanding about what helps children feel safe. I'm related to some of them. They deserve to understand as much as their children do. Little kids put themselves and others in categories to make sense of the world. But when they're told that they're wrong about themselves for long enough, it can have disastrous consequences for their mental health and physical safety, not to mention their education. My preschooler's classmates routinely undermine her gender and criticize her clothing choices. Even this morning, she was too embarrassed to wear the new dress she had so excitedly picked out at the store. The kids at school have already told her that she is wrong about being a girl and that she isn't supposed to wear dresses. These kids are 3 and 4 years old, but they are teaching one another that my child isn't who she says she is and that she's better off in hiding. I hate to imagine the impact this way of thinking is having on my kid and others like her as she prepares to enter kindergarten at a Durham public school this fall. Other families tell me there's no guarantee that a gender expansive child will end up in the classroom of an affirming teacher supported by an informed and respectful administration. This is unjust, and the school board now has an opportunity to fix things, and I hope that they do. In the first weeks after my child told me she was a girl, I absentmindedly referred to her as a boy. She corrected me. I apologized and told her that I knew she was a girl, but that I might slip up from time to time since I had thought she was a boy for so long. She told me it's okay to make a mistake, and it is. But if teachers and school administrators are allowed to disrespect, neglect, and fail to educate gender expansive children and their peers, that is not a mistake. There is a difference between an occasional slip up and, despite having all the information you need, choosing to do the wrong thing. I ask that you approve comprehensive policies and support for DPS teachers and staff so that children like mine can learn in an environment of safety and respect. Thank you for your time.
Our next speaker is Sakawi, Hempstreet.
Good evening. My name is Sakawi Hempstreet, and I live in Durham with my wife and 2 and 5-year-old kids. I use she or they pronouns. Pronouns are the words we use in place of a person's name. So you can say Anne is speaking, she is speaking, or they are speaking. See how easy that was? Did that feel inappropriate for a child? Did it make you question your gender identity or sexual orientation in any way? Teachers and administration at safe and equitable schools for LGBTQ and gender diverse children make sharing pronouns a common practice. This creates a safe space for all children to consciously consider what words feel good for them. It prevents gender diverse children from being singled out, bullied, or put in a place of having to explain or advocate for themselves over and over again. Respecting and normalizing sharing pronouns is a small yet meaningful piece of a more comprehensive and district-wide approach to gender and LGBTQ inclusive schools that we're here asking you for today. I recognize that LGBTQ rights have long been politicized, and people in leadership positions like yourselves are often in situations where they fear backlash for standing up for equity, human rights, social and racial justice. I don't envy the position you are in. But I do believe that we can't allow that fear to stop us from moving our community and culture forward towards equity. We also need to consider that if we, and particularly white, cisgender, heterosexual adults, feel some fear about speaking up for gender and LGBTQ equity, imagine how these young children feel every day, advocating for themselves in your schools, advocating for the safety and support to be who they are. I am the founder of Rainbow Collective for Change, a program that builds safe and equitable spaces for LGBTQ and gender diverse children and families. I've worked with hundreds of classrooms to become spaces where gender diverse and LGBTQ kids and families feel like they belong. When we moved to Durham, I figured this beautifully diverse, progressive, and vibrant city would have had this all figured out already. But the more conversations I have with parents and teachers, the more I realize there is still work to be done. I believe the majority of this community, and probably most, if not all of you, believe that gender and family diversity adds to the beauty and strength of this incredible city. But it seems like many of the systems need to catch up, including Durham Public Schools. I've spoken with several DPS administrative staff, and so I was not watching that. I brought the letter here today. I organized a group of people. We have 650 signatures as of right now. So I would like to leave a copy of the letter for you all on the podium here and appreciate your consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. If you'd like to put the letters right, oh, somebody's going to pick it up. Thank you.
Yep.
Our next speaker is Anne Claire.
Hi, my name is Anne Clark and I use she, her pronouns. Like many people here tonight, I want to talk to you about the importance of a district-wide gender support and inclusion policy. I could talk about the scary statistics about the prevalence of depression, anxiety, and suicidal ideation amongst trans youth. I could talk about the many reasons why representation and inclusion matter. But today I'm going to talk about the story of a child, my son, a kindergartner in DPS, who is brave and courageous enough to express his authentic self. You see, when he was born, we were wrong about his gender. He gave us clues along the way that we had misidentified him, but we didn't get the message. About 6 months ago, he said it explicitly. His 6-year-old self found the strength and bravery to tell his family that something was wrong, something didn't fit, something wasn't comfortable. As a family, we jumped into the action of supporting our son in his journey. We started socially transitioning among family and friends, and we are so lucky to have the community that we have. It was bumpy and emotional and filled with big feelings, but foundationally, it was joyful. He was joyful. And he soon decided that he wanted everyone at school to know. We were fortunate to find some support there. Teachers, staff, and administrators were quick to update the pronouns they used and were open about their need for more education. Our son would come home each day excited by the acceptance. But there was reluctance from the school to discuss my son's transition with his classmates. There was a lack of understanding about how and why it is important to have these conversations. There was fear there would be discomfort from parents about discussing gender in class. It was suggested to us that my son could have the conversations with his classmates, but he's 6, and that is an unreasonable expectation. What does it communicate to him that the adults in the room wouldn't talk about this change or answer questions from his classmates? What message does he receive about his own validity and inclusion? It's important for everyone to be talked to and about in language that feels good and right. It hurt him every time he heard someone misgender him. He asked every day if his teacher could make an announcement to tell the other kids his new pronouns. It took a lot of advocating and educating behind the scenes, but we finally made it happen. It was clunky, and there's still more work to do to help teachers and counselors and administrators get comfortable with discussing this topic. But it needs to happen because the difference it has made in the everyday lived experience and happiness of my son is huge. Every kid deserves this. School should be a safe place for kids to be themselves, to be supported so that they can learn and grow and thrive. I hope this district will live up to its progressive values and pass a district-wide gender support policy so that we can provide educators and administrators with the education and training to have conversations comfortably and fluidly about gender. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Abby Bender.
I'm here to talk to you about an incredibly important issue to me and my family. Both my kids are students at DPS in 1st and 3rd grade. Recently, my 3rd grader came to me and told me that they would like to use the pronouns they, them, and identify as non-binary. I immediately sat down with them and said, how do you want to proceed? Who do you want to share this information with? And tried to follow their lead. They told me that they did want to tell the adults at their schools to move forward. So I want to tell you about the situation and kind of how that went when I was interacting with the school at that level. I immediately emailed the principal and asked to meet with the principal to set up a plan to try to share this information more widely. And I didn't get a response for about 3 months from the principal, no response at all. My child's teacher was on maternity leave and they asked me just let it go until the teacher comes back and then try to contact the teacher and we'll get in touch. And so I immediately contacted the teacher when they came back. The teacher responded immediately. We set up a meeting. They were incredibly supportive. They immediately started thinking of ways they could change the environment in the classroom, not genderizing boys and girls, doing things that would allow my child to feel more accepted. I finally was able to set up a meeting with the principal and a couple of our administrative staffs. And what ended up happening was a really horrible experience for me. I'm really happy that my child hasn't had this experience, but really the whole meeting was them telling me that my child needed permission to share their identity at school from the families of other kids at that school. And that was the conversation. They told me that that was district policy. I presented multiple examples of how, maybe they could share their pronouns or their identity. They said, okay, they can share their pronouns, but they can't share their identity because other kids might not understand that, or other families might not want their kids exposed to that. And that was what the principal of my child's school told me. I'm going to say I cried during that meeting because I did not expect to have that reaction. It was a really emotional experience for me. I work with transgender patients. I'm a physician. And so this is an area that I know a lot about. And I have a lot more to say and I don't have enough time to say it, but I think, I've been jumping through hoops. I've been meeting with administrators. I've been doing the advocacy and it's a privilege that I get to do this advocacy. And not every parent of a transgender child would have the time and energy that I have to get to the point where we can share this information and my kid can be who they are in their school. At this point in time, their pronouns have not been shared. They've asked for support to share those pronouns. Their teacher is not allowed to talk about gender in the classroom. We haven't gotten to that point yet. And I'm just asking for something different for other families moving forward, because I don't want anybody to have the experience that I had going into this situation and I'm still having to this day. Thank you for your time.
Our next speaker is Adrian.
Hello, I'm Adrian. I use he and they pronouns. I am employed by the LGBTQ Center of Durham. However, I'm here tonight expressing my own views and experiences as a resident of Durham and a parent of 2 former DPS students. I stand before you with privilege that is not shared by many current families in DPS. I was a full-time stay-at-home parent for my children's entire school experience. I am white. I have a college degree. My family was able to take advantage of educational choices. My son and I no longer fear retaliation for speaking up. There are many students who do not have parents with this privilege and who themselves do not have support from their parents. My story is not their story. Their story will be told when they feel safer to do so, which may mean never. 10 years ago, my son asked to see a gender therapist. He was an 8th grade student in a small local charter school. During that spring semester, he decided to socially transition over the summer and begin high school as himself. I was nervous, about this nervous. My son was going to walk into a building of 1,200 students. Would he be safe? Who would he turn to if he needed help navigating bullying, harassment, discrimination, things he'd already experienced at his small school? I found who the GSA advisor was, and I invited myself to their classroom and had a conversation. It did not exactly put me at ease. It did, however, allow me to respect my son's wishes and enroll him in DPS for the fall. I was in the meeting with the counselor selecting classes. The talk about 9th grade gym and locker rooms was rough. The counselor called him by the wrong name, but we came out of that meeting with a class schedule. My son attended 2 of the 3 days of freshman orientation and refused to return. We re-enrolled him in that charter school because sometimes the challenges are easier to tolerate than facing new ones. Being asked if you're a boy or a girl, being told that's not your name, teachers refusing to use his name and pronouns, only being allowed to use the nurse's bathroom. The principal, after being in a meeting that I had arranged with a national advocate for transgender student rights and practically ignoring all that he should have learned, I know now that Title IX could have been our tool for a more successful accepting education for him. Instead, he missed most of that year, spent a second 9th grade year in another charter, came back to DPS, and ultimately left the dropout prevention school at 18, a school where he was yelled at by staff to get out of the bathroom while he was getting paper towels for a friend who was bleeding in the gym. My son survived multiple hostile environments, period.
Our next speaker is Jackie Turnwald.
Good evening. My name is Jackie Turnwald. My pronouns are they, them, and I'm a trans non-binary educator. After talking with the LGBTQ Center of Durham, the Rainbow Collective for Change, and hearing from families of queer children in Durham Public Schools, I come before you to request that DPS take the time to develop and implement a thorough and representative gender equity policy for students and staff. While exploring this issue, I was told that DPS already has a policy, and a link was shared with me outlining said policy, which in my 12 years as an educator with DPS, I had never seen and had never been a part of any training I received. And it certainly wasn't enforced, because I can think of numerous instances over the years where I regularly had to ask staff or administrators to do something as simple as to use the correct pronouns for transgender students. In fact, I shared my concerns about the lack of support for queer students and staff with Dr. Mabenga when I exited DPS at the end of 2021. However, I know that as recently as last June, the DPS Communications Office refused to put out an internally developed statement written in support of Pride. I know that because of that refusal, I said I wasn't interested in an opportunity to return to DPS as a now out trans non-binary educator. Further, I'm aware of a queer elementary school teacher who was sent to HR after reading a children's book with their elementary school class from the school library called Prince and Knight, where 2 males get married at the end of the book. They were told they needed to use good judgment and to send home permission slips before reading such materials. Administrators then started doing extra observations and requiring additional lesson plans, harassing them until they quit due to the added stress. This begs the question, are permission slips needed in DPS elementary schools to read children's books where a male and a female get married at the end of the book? Do children in classrooms need permission slips to talk to their queer classmates or their classmates with queer parents? These are certainly not equitable policies. And it's well past time that DPS sat down with organizations representing our queer community and families of queer kids in DPS who have experienced these disparities to develop more comprehensive policies, preferably modeled after the best practices being used in Orange and Buncombe counties, do extensive trainings, and incorporate appropriate grade level curriculum that is inclusive of the queer community in DPS. Thank you for your time this evening.
As we stated before we began, we recognized that the agenda was slated to begin at 6 p.m. So we will go ahead and circle back to finish up on public comments because we want to make sure that everybody has enough time to have been here by that 6 p.m. and also had enough time to sign up. Okay, so we do have one more, please.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Jenna Meehan. I use she, her pronouns. I'm a white woman in my mid-30s with dark blonde hair that is tied in a bun, and I'm wearing a sweatshirt that says Protect Trans Kids. I am the parent of a gender-expansive child who attends Parkwood Elementary School. As my family learns and grows to support and affirm my child, we are also required to be constant advocates, monitors, educators, and protectors due to Durham Public Schools' lack of policy and protection for trans and gender-expansive students. It is exhausting, unsustainable, and emotionally harmful for my child, and also highlights this reactive strategy to systemic problems of exhausting parents and caregivers who have the privilege to attempt to fight the inequitable system until they no longer can. Under the protection of Title IX, no person should be denied the benefits of or be subjected to discrimination under any education program or activity receiving federal financial assistance. Currently, DPS is not upholding Title IX and rather has recently added a list of unenforceable guidelines to its website and states that it will determine gender inclusive needs on a case-by-case basis. The lack of policies and protections for students who are and continue to be discriminated against with only possible support for students and caregivers who have the ability and privilege to advocate for their students' individual support is inequitable and illegal against the protections of Title IX. I join the voices of advocates for my own child and all the students who deserve and have a right to a public education without discrimination, bias, or harassment. My child has an amazingly supportive, caring, and compassionate teacher who we are so completely thankful for. Ms. Dolores Wade has supported and affirmed my child, educated other teachers in the building about their pronouns and gender identity, and is wholeheartedly growing with us as we learn how to navigate it all in a school system without policies or administrative guidance. We are incredibly lucky to have such an amazing teacher. However, even with that extreme luck and support, there are still so many things to advocate and educate in a school building with educators and administrators that do not have the knowledge, gender affirming training, or enforceable policies about how to support and affirm students. My child wrote a letter to their principal asking for help, and they agreed I could share it. Dear Principal Rasconi, I don't feel safe at school. No one is using they, them pronouns. Sometimes I feel like I do not belong here. And sometimes I want to eat lunch alone. And one more thing, sometimes I hear adults talking about me. That's the part I hate. So I like what you say on the announcements, because on the first day of school and every day, I feel like a total moron. It would make me feel better if all the kids and adults at school knew what it meant to be non-binary or trans. If you can please help me. Thank you for prioritizing the safety and well-being of all of our children.
I will see if we have any other public comments. Okay, so there are no more in-person public comments. And it looks like we have been going on for about 25 minutes. So Mr. Sutter, do you have any online comments?
We received 26 online comments.
Can we maybe give 30 seconds per comment?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you for setting the timer, Ms. Smith. 30 seconds for each comment. First comment comes from Aaron James Crook. I urge you to consider the removal of the mask mandate. I urge you to reconsider the removal of the mask mandate indoors at DPS schools on the 11th of this month. On the Durham County COVID dashboard, test positivity has crept up recently, 1.8 to 2%, and cases have plateaued at a level almost 3 times higher than last July when masks were mandatory for the start of school, 17 versus 45 average cases a day. The North Carolina State dashboard shows that BA2 is starting to increase its prevalence, and wastewater monitoring in Durham County is seeing an increase in COVID load. The next comment is from Chelsea Earls. As a proud DPS parent and as a former public school student, I want to join the chorus calling for action to make our schools safer for queer and trans and non-binary students. When I was in high school, I decided not to think about whether or not I might be queer because I knew it wasn't safe in my school environment. When my daughter started kindergarten in a DPS school, she was comfortable and used to being referred to with multiple pronouns. Even though her teachers were supportive and wonderful, she was clear after 1 week that she needed to go by she and be a girl to fit in there. Next is from Bonnie Dye. Today, I am writing to urge that the DPS BOE develop a more consistent policy to ensure that gender diverse kids are loved and supported no matter which Durham public school they attend. Without a district-wide policy and comprehensive gender and LGBTQ education, support for gender diverse kids is inconsistent and inequitable as it's based on the school administration or their individual teachers. I believe the changes suggested below would create a more supportive and accepting environment for all children at DPS. I would like to urge the BOE to pass a gender support guidelines policy. The next comment is anonymous. For staff members who have not complied with the vaccine mandate, please require them to continue wearing masks. It is not fair for students or other staff to be exposed to them, especially given their non-compliance with board directives. Next is from Jennifer Moynihan Wynn. Gender inclusion and safety for LGBTQIA+ youth is so important. There is a large amount of evidence that suggests that LGBTQIA+ youth who grow up in a supportive and affirming environment have significant protective factors against suicide. The next comment is from Samuel. It is not DPS's job to teach my child gender identity. It is your job to teach reading, writing, and arithmetic. Let parents handle this subject. The next comment is from Jan Harris. Gender identity is a boy and a girl is a girl. You don't have to be a biologist to know this. It's not your place to teach them anything different. I'm so glad my child will not be in the DPS system in the fall. The school board has failed our kids by politicizing everything instead of focusing on actual studies. You should be ashamed of yourselves for hurting our children. Next comment is from Lynette. As the grandmother of an Easley kindergartner whose 2-year-old brother still can't receive a COVID vaccine, I ask you to consider postponing the board's earlier decision to drop mask requirements on April 11th. New data show the spread of the BA2 variant of COVID in North Carolina, and letting down our guard next week means not only putting school-aged kids at higher risk, but also their younger unprotected siblings. This is especially germane since some evidence indicates that BA2 can impact children under 5 more seriously than older youngsters. Removing mask requirements now is all the more troubling. Next comment is from Rachel Torcaso. I would like to express my desire to not support the implementation of the gender support guidelines proposed by other public comments in their entirety as written. I would like to see the board have a community and staff discussion before any policy or guidelines were implemented. Please give the parents, staff, teachers, and students a chance to speak on these matters, either for or against, before you implement any kind of mandatory training or curriculum changes for pre-K through 12 students. I would like to point you to the Cross versus Loudoun County School Board case and caution you to work with, not against, your teachers, even those who might have differing opinion. Next is from Jenny Schaefer Goldberg. I'm writing to support the adoption of a gender support guidelines policy similar to those passed and enforced in neighboring Orange County and Buncombe County that is being advocated by the Rainbow Collective for Change. I'm a parent of 2 children whom we are raising to be allies and tolerant of people of different races, cultures, genders, family structures, and abilities. We are new to DPS from New Jersey, where LGBTQ friendly and supportive policies were in place. I'm not aware of how kids who are non-cisgendered are supported in either of my son's schools, and I want to be sure that they are. I want to know that if my sons at any point identified differently. The next comment is from Dana Calder. There is much work still to be covered for gender diverse education. Having a policy allows for reinforcing a commitment to training educators, teachers, and students. This commitment helps people who are gender diverse or have people they care for who are gender diverse feel they can bring their whole self to school without ridicule. vital for young adults and shows progress toward inclusion. I'd ask DPS to really consider making this commitment similar to Orange County. It will attract more diversity to DPS and strengthen the bonds of diversity in Durham. Next is Teresa O'Donnell. I'm writing to advocate for policy changes to increase support and acceptance of LGBTQ+ students, staff, and faculty. I became concerned when I heard my child's former elementary school was putting limits on how a gender nonconforming student was allowed to express their gender identity at school, including needing permission from classmates' parents before they were allowed to ask their peers to use they, them, their pronouns. As a DPS parent and a college counselor at a public school in North Carolina, I can speak to the vital importance of allowing children of any age the ability to name and claim their own gender identity. Next is the comment from Stella Sin. I'm a parent of a DPS student. The topic of gender equality and belonging are of great importance to me and my child. From the very beginning, my child has shown great acceptance of gender equality and would readily form relationships with kids without not even questioning their identities, because that is just not important for her. Friendships she has formed are now an intricate part of our family. As she is becoming older and recognized the lack of LGBTQIA representation and exposure at her school, she expressed concerns about how her LGBTQIA friends are treated at their schools. As a cis Asian female, next comment is from Shoshana Carroll. Trans students deserve school support. If you are lucky enough to know or have a transgender student in your life, you will be astounded at their creativity, overjoyed by their enthusiasm, and encouraged by their care for others. Trans youth are, simply put, amazing. In the midst of a country that has introduced over 250 anti-LGBTQ bills this year alone, trans youth are resilient, community-focused, and empathetic. Trans youth are leading the way in their communities, showing the beauty of diversity in action. Trans students have been disproportionately attacked by state bills across the country and in North Carolina. The next comment is from Eric. It's not the teacher's responsibility to teach children gender identity, sexuality, or to look at each other by the color of their skin. This is the very reason our children are depressed and full of anxiety. Leave them alone and do your job by teaching math, reading, writing, etc. My child will not attend another DPS if you allow this to happen. It's time to vote in another school board, one that will build our children up and give them confidence and knowledge to go out into the world and know they can accomplish anything, no matter the color of their skin, gender, or anything else. You have gotten so far away from Martin Luther King's dream. Next comment is from Neil Kaner. Dear board members, I would like to put yourself into the shoes of a job seeker for just a moment. Below are both the substitute opportunities and full-time positions at one of our elementary schools. A job seeker will likely evaluate how difficult a daily, temporary, long-term sub-assignment will be. Likewise, a full-time job seeker will determine if a position on frontline will have multiple openings. There are 6 sub-opportunities at Eno Valley this morning. 4 of them require a commitment until the end of the school year. 4 of the 6 are for IAs in an EC classroom. Another is for an EC teacher. This saddens me greatly. It also informs me that this school cannot hold on to its IAs and has an issue within all EC classrooms. There are 12 job openings. The next comment comes from, apologies, having to do a lot of scrolling here. Next comment comes from Anonymous. Wake, Chapel Hill, Carborough, and Orange County school systems have a great deal of information about their summer learning, not just camp programs. They also have staff openings listed to make applicants better informed about deciding to work there. DPS's website has scant information and no way to apply for a job at present. How was the budgeting done? Garbage in, garbage out is a common refrain when preparing budgets. I believe that this applies to DPS. The next comment is from Abby Marshall. Good afternoon. I am a 3rd grade teacher in DPS, and I wanted to take a moment to share an experience I have had this year regarding the LGBTQ community. The amount of resources and support for our LGBTQ community is disheartening. I have experienced firsthand that DPS is not yet equipped to support these students, especially at the elementary level. Having a student that identifies as non-binary has brought to light many of the roadblocks that similar students are facing, including not having curriculum resources that help students learn about diversity, racial, cultural, gender, family structure, ability. The next comment comes from Ashley Gosselin Ildari. Coronavirus caseloads have been exceptionally low throughout this academic year, thanks to wise guidance such as vaccination for DPS staff and indoor masking for all students and staff. With the BA.2 Omicron subvariant on the rise across the country and with less than 40% of children fully vaccinated in Durham County, now is not the time to drop the mask requirement. Our family, including our kindergartner, is fully vaccinated, but we have friends with young children who are not yet eligible to receive the vaccine. Loosening mask requirements now puts those children at unnecessary risk. Please reconsider. Next is from Shannon Kulinski. My name is Shannon Kulinski, and I am a teacher in DPS and also a mother. I'm submitting a comment today in light of a situation that has occurred at my school with a former student that is dear to my heart and in support of any other students and families that have also experienced similar situations regarding gender identity and expression and LGBTQ equality. My partner of 7 years has a transgender child who currently attends a school in Orange County. However, he will be attending DPS next year for the start of high school. I am advocating for him too. I have experience with the impact that gender identity and expression has. Next is from Eleanor Anderson. Please continue with your plan to go mask optional. Updated today, Durham is still in green as noted by the CDC. Despite cases in Europe rising, we are not yet seeing a surge from BA.2. We have not heard of any significant outbreaks since Wake County schools went mask optional, nor in other counties across NC. I know many parents are anxious about making masks optional. I've seen threads on parent groups. However, I worry about coddling parents and indulging their anxieties in this way. We know kids are low risk, and we know people are able to keep masking in schools. Next is Maria Bajgain. I urge the board to pass a policy for supporting students of all genders and sexualities, similar to policies adopted in Orange and Buncombe counties, as well as to provide and require comprehensive gender and LGBTQ training for all staff and administrators, and to provide learning about all types of diversity for K-12 students. It is so important that students are supported through all their differences for their mental well-being and for the purpose of creating a happier, healthier, and more inclusive society. Many students live in LGBTQ homes or are LGBTQ themselves, and they are still faced with many stereotypes and negative outcomes. I am a bisexual woman married to a man, and my oldest daughter went through a period where she thought she was in love with her best girlfriend. She has reported hearing several negative things from kids at school, like that. Next comment is from Brian Calloway. I want to state my objection once again to including capital funding to the tune of $6 million in the annual operating budget of DPS. Outside of grants or other similar earmarked sources, capital projects should always be paid out of borrowed or bond sources so that users can contribute to large capital purchases over the course of their residence in Durham. It is equitable for me to contribute towards the new Durham County Library as long as I am living in Durham. We didn't ask the snapshot of Durham taxpayers of 2018. Next is Aaron Bristow. My name is Aaron Bristow. My pronouns are she, her. I apologize for not being present in person. I ran into childcare issues. I'm a nurse practitioner in the community as well as mother to 2 children, a kindergartner and a 3rd grader at Forest View Elementary. Last summer, my then 7-year-old came to me and said, "Mom, I'm a they." We had previously, in sort of vague terms, introduced the idea of gender as a spectrum, and as my child grew and started to witness their peers begin to engage in traditional gender expression, the concept of identifying as non-binary became more and more resonant for them. Next is Kendall Solomon. Being a non-binary pansexual person, it's been hard in middle school for me. I was just figuring myself out and I felt like I had a bunch of people against me. It was even worse because my parents were non-supportive because of their religion, and I couldn't talk to them about anything. I was so glad to have a non-binary teacher this year, so there was someone who might have had similar experiences to me. All the teachers and staff are very LGBTQ plus friendly, and I feel like I can talk to them about anything. I'm glad that I have people I can go to if I have any issues. And then our final public comment comes from Sarah May. Our schools should be focusing on helping our kids excel in reading, math, and science. Schools should not be discussing gender and sexual identities in the classrooms, and especially not to those in pre-K to 4th grade. Thank you. That concludes the excerpts from the online public comments. All of the public comments are available on full on the DPS website on the page for this meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Sutterth. Public comments allow people to be seen and heard. So we're just really acknowledging that we see them and hear them. And just my thought on this, some of what we've heard today, not a direct response. It's more or less discrimination of any kind should be disavowed. We constantly talk about representation in schools, and that's not limited just to race. So this is a time where we could always remember that bullying of any type should not be accepted at all. So we will now go ahead and move to our consent items. I believe everybody has had the opportunity to review this in advance. Are there any thoughts or action? If not, I'll accept the motion.
Move approval of the consent agenda.
Second.
It's been moved by Mr. Sears and seconded by Ms. Byer. We will go, any discussion? If not, we'll go to a roll call vote. Ms. Valladares, before we do that, did you have any discussion on this?
No, I looked over the consent items and I'm glad that we're
Okay.
approving. So I vote aye.
Ms. Byer,
Aye.
Ms. Umstead,
Aye.
Ms. Lewis,
Aye.
Mr. Lee,
Aye.
Mr. Sears.
Aye.
My name is Frederick. I vote aye as well. It passes unanimously. And we will now move to academic services, the strategic plan priority 4 update. And I believe that will be headed by Mr. Sutterth and Dr. Hardy.
Mr. Sutterth is coming to the podium. We're always excited to share updates with you regarding our strategic plan. And I will turn it over to Mr. Sutterth to provide an update for priority 4.
Thank you very much, Dr. Hardy. I'm inviting in my colleagues who lead the Priority 4 goal teams to have a seat and join me. And we have a few more members of the Priority 4 goal teams outside in the hallway. I appreciate them all for being here. Recently in Durham Public Schools, we've been having conversations about reclamation, as we have experienced 2 very, very hard years of the pandemic, a pandemic that is not yet over. But as we are beginning to reach out to our community in traditional ways once more. Yesterday, we were able to announce that we are able to open up our facilities for rental for community events once more. Little examples like that of being able to reconnect with families, with the community in ways that we had been accustomed to. I'm going to take a very brief amount of time on this update, and I'm happy to speak to anyone of you at length and anybody else in the community afterward to talk about ways that we can improve. I'm going to give you some examples of some great things that we are doing in strengthening school, family, and community engagement. And I'm going to close with an announcement about a way that we are going to make it systematically better moving forward through the collaborations that we have in this organization. Durham's values circle around community engagement. That is who we are. We are a noisy, active, integrated community. We have conversations with each other about how we want to improve things. We envision, we dream. In the last 2 years, we've done it in different ways. But I think that this is who Durham is. We can go to the next slide, please. And then if we'll fast forward to team members. And I would like my team to please stand up and be counted. Nina Cooper, Micah Tweetmeyer, Dietrich Morrison-Danner, Melissa Watson, Greg Jones. Leadership and members of those goal teams. Priority goal 4A, if we could go to that next slide, 2 slides ahead. This is an overview of the 3 prongs of the priority 4. Goal A being that DPS will improve the perception of each school. Goal B, that we will strengthen family and school and community engagement. And goal C, that every school will have a community partner that's committed to providing meaningful programs and services. If we'll go to the next slide. I've said over and over when we've been talking about priority 4 and particularly about goal 4A is that we used the teacher working conditions survey as the best available proxy for gauging community support and satisfaction for our schools. We look at the questions about whether the community we serve is supportive of this school, whether the school maintains clear two-way communication, that there's an atmosphere of trust and mutual respect in the school, and that overall my school is a good place to work and learn. And we identified benchmarks starting on where we were. If we could go to the next slide, I'm pleased to let you know that from 2018 to 2021, we have made improvements in every category. And with the sole exception of benchmarks for two-way communication, we are ahead of the benchmarks that were set in 2018 at the establishment of the strategic plan. Next slide, please. Here you see some of the strategies that were adopted by the 52-member community panel that created the strategic plan. To be rather than to seem, that's our state motto. You'll see that the strategies talk about communicating, but also engaging and the importance of two-way communication. If we go to the next slide, we have some updates. And again, people can take a look at these in depth when we, if you go online to the agenda packet. In place, in progress, and next steps, as you're used to seeing. We've done some incredible work, particularly with the Growing Together project, to reach out and provide two-way communication online and in person. We are providing information in magazine format. We have phenomenal work that's being done right now in media relations. You couldn't turn on a computer in the last 24 hours without seeing Frank at Bethesda going out to the Scripps spelling bee. We are telling the story of Durham Public Schools, but we're also doing the work to make sure that we are being rather than seeming. In progress, I want to highlight the board's approval of the expenditures on the DPS app that is on the way. We'll be starting that next school year. It's going to be great. People are going to be able to download a DPS app from the Apple or the Google Play Store. There's our logo. They can go straight to their school. Information that's on the school's websites will be translated to the app. It'll provide smoother two-way communication, more reliable text messaging if we need to let parents know about an emergency. It's going to be a great thing. One next step that I wanted to particularly highlight, and I'd like to call Sheena up for just a couple of seconds, is the Parent Ambassadors Program that we're excited to kick off soon.
Thank you so much. Good evening, Chair Umstead, board members, Dr. Mabenga, and colleagues. Parents and guardians are an essential component of Durham Public Schools community. They are the lifeline to our students, champions of our schools and staff, and can advocate for DPS in a way among families that the district cannot. Research shows that people value the opinions and information shared by peers, friends, and neighbors more than that of media, publications, and other entities. It is necessary to engage our parents in our efforts to deepen connections within the district and our school communities and throughout the Durham community. The Office of School Relations, Title I Family Engagement, and the Office of Public Affairs have worked collaboratively to create the Durham Public Schools Parent Ambassador Program. The program aims to develop a core group of parents and guardians to assist the district in strategic initiatives, strengthen relationships between parents, the district, and community members, establish an additional gateway from the district to schools, elevate DPS messaging and pride within one of our most important stakeholder groups, and further exhibit the connections between family engagement and student success. The Ambassador Program begins with its inaugural cohort at the end of this month and will be scaled over the next school year to include parents and guardians from all DPS schools. We are excited to work with our families more closely to support student outcomes and celebrate the outstanding achievements of our students, staff, and district. Thank you.
If we could move forward, please, to goal 4B, that DPS will strengthen family, school, and community engagement by demonstrating a 20% increase in parent and family participation in school programs. This is an area where, of course, we've had to change what we've been doing in the last couple of years. Family Academy and Title I did some amazing things online, particularly at the start of the pandemic when we were so completely remote. The Family Academy really is the gold standard. And what they are doing with Title I is what we want to replicate across the district. How we do that, it's a little complicated because how the Title I schools do family engagement is prescribed. Dietrich makes sure that they are supported and held accountable and making that happen. How do we extend that to our non-Title I schools to make sure that everyone's having that same experience? It's still a work in progress. But if you look at what we have been able to do in family engagement in recent years, I just want to highlight just a few examples. I promise I won't take long. Durham Public Schools has partnered with ISLA to provide online platicas to inform families about topics of concern during the pandemic. A really strong parent-family relationship online that was an outgrowth of many of the Latinx family meetings that board member Alexandra Valladares spearheaded prior to coming onto the board. Other things that we have done with the Latinx community, we provide virtual simultaneous Spanish language interpretation during these very work sessions. That's a gold standard. Not every district does that. And we're very active in making sure that our electronic our digital content is language friendly as well. That's just one example. Family engagement is happening, whether it's speaking of Bethesda Elementary School, thinking of vaccine clinics that they have put together in working with the school PTA. I will get to the systematic piece of this, but rest assured that our schools are engaging and they're doing the work. How do we make sure that everybody knows it and that we're doing it consistently and evenly across the district? That's our next step. I also want to point out that the Durham County PTA Council has invited us to work with the North Carolina PTA as part of the national PTA process of updating the national standards for family school partnerships. They've invited some of our leaders to participate in that process as well. Great things are happening here. Finally, Goal C, that every school will have a community partner that is committed to providing meaningful programs and services to meet the diverse needs of students. We thought that getting to 100% would be a 5-year project. We're not quite at 100%, but last year, in the midst of pandemic, 99% of schools had at least one community partner. And if we go forward to the DPS definition of community partner slide, let's go one more, please. One more. We have a fairly rigorous definition. A community partnership is an agreement between a school and an outside group whose goal is to meet a meaningful academic, college career readiness, or social emotional need for its students. At 99% of our schools, they have at least one community partner that meets that definition. We have another strategic plan to work on. 2023 is the last year of this one. What's our next step? But we're still working the strategies. If we could go to the next slide, we're still working the strategies to figure out what those next steps are, and also to improve the quality and the consistency of those partnerships. Which brings me to the other announcement that I want to make tonight. The systematic piece. We are creating, under Dr. Mabenga's authorization, a DPS family and community engagement team. If you go to the next slide. These are one more slide, please. These are the DPS departments that are leaders in different kinds of family and community engagement. There's no single home for all of that at this time, but public affairs, school relations, federal programs and professional learning, Title I, equity affairs, multilingual resource center, we all have boots on the ground. We've been getting the work done. Sometimes we haven't known what each other has been doing. Sometimes we've been duplicating effort. We can work together on this. So we have created and formalized this organization, this team, to expand efforts in supporting the district and schools to better engage and inform stakeholders about district and school-led activities and initiatives. We're using best practices. We're working together. We will find ways to strengthen the internal infrastructure for that work, but it starts with us being intentional around the table and making sure that we are working together with our community. And then we'll invite our families to tell us what they need, and we'll continue that work. School, family, community engagement. We can always do better, but it is the heart of Durham Public Schools, and it is how we will support the other four priorities of this strategic plan. I'm happy to take your questions. I hope I didn't breeze too fast through this, but it's important to give you the highlights.
Ms. Valladares, would you like to start off, or do you have any questions?
Yes, I just want to thank Mr. Sutter and Dr. Hardy and the entire team that was very instrumental in looking at all the different ways we try to engage in DPS. And where are some areas where we can definitely improve and focus. I'm really excited about the app. I think it is definitely something that we found during the pandemic when there were so many resources out there, and just, you know, the question is how to connect community members with the resources they need right now. When it came to COVID, there was a 360 app that was being used. Community health workers were being trained on that. And, you know, there's a lot of development in terms of how that app would be willing to connect all the dots and connect things. I think when it comes to DPS, we have a longstanding history of engagement, parents, as you mentioned, in the SIT team, school improvement teams, parents in the PTAs, parent in the affinity groups and the different community groups that have been partners with DPS for a long time, providing supports for specific affinity groups, and also across the board with the strategic plan, with decisions that DPS makes and ways that we communicate. And so I'm excited about this app. I do have a question about using Blackboard. I do use Blackboard. I mean, maybe it's something that I haven't really seen, because I've been using Blackboard for years, since I was a student at NCCU, and now I'm a student also at University of Vermont, and it's like Blackboard is just being used everywhere. But I'm wondering how the decision for Blackboard, how we came on that, and just would love to hear it. I'm curious, since I use it in different ways, and I'm pretty sure the way we're going to use it be there's considerations behind why we're using that. So just had a question on that.
We use Blackboard largely because a decision was made to transition to that platform several years ago. We are comfortable with it as an organization, and moving from that platform can be a difficult thing for our schools and constituents to manage. We have additional support in the app, the package that the board approved, that integrates with Blackboard well. So it is an opportunity for us to provide better services for our families and constituencies with a minimum of disruption to our school communities and leaders.
Thank you so much, Chip. I'm really excited to look forward to the development and things that are added to the app in ways that, again, parents can feel more connected to their school site, to their school community, but also just to the district and to understand a little more about the different departments. I think that our website has a lot of information, but I'm always finding parents that say, I didn't know, they're learning something new from the website, and the information could be made even more accessible. I know that we're always trying to make it even better, but I think this app is definitely a way to go. Thank you so much for all your work.
Thank you.
Mr. Sears?
Thank you. I don't have any questions or critique, but a lot of us are getting asked questions in the community right now because of the time of year and the year it is. And this presentation, along with the other updates we've gotten, make it very easy to respond. When folks ask me, what are you going to do to fix this district? My response is we have a 5-year strategic plan and we're working the plan. And you continue to demonstrate. I have, in my 8 years, I am the most comfortable I've been in this seat watching what the district is doing. So thank you for the work. Kudos, keep pushing. We hear every meeting, we have more work to do. The plan can be 1 million pages long and we'll keep working it, but I'm appreciative of these efforts.
Ms. Lewis and then Ms. Hempstead.
Thank you, Mr. Sutter. That was, again, hearing where we are and where we're going is always so helpful. You had me on the edge of my seat waiting to hear the big reveal at the end. But I definitely, again, appreciate even hearing in the beginning that we are opening our schools up to the community, because those community partnerships can continue to solidify and grow with each other with the work that's happening. And we know that there's a lot of partnerships in our schools. So it's good to hear that the district is coming together with a comprehensive plan. I remember Dr. Dan and I talked about this probably 4 years ago. There's so many different touch points for parent, guardian, caregivers engagement, but what does it look like to bring it together systematically? And I know that you all have been working really hard on that effort. There's now the parent ambassadors that's beginning, and there's a Title I parent advisory group that's been meeting for, consistently at the every month. There's a meeting. So I would love to see how these parents are going to come together across the district to be a support and resources to get better academic results for our kids, what this partnership looks like. COVID has definitely presented us an opportunity to bridge school and home when our parents were the teacher aides to our educators, right? So again, not getting back to the way things used to be, but using that opportunity to learn and grow and develop these relationships even deeper for the success of our children. So thank you for this presentation. One thing you did, you talked about the systemic work of the different departments. Well, I think that was the main thing I want to say is how are the parent groups going to be coming together, and then with the system happening, I just want to hear more about the updates on what this looks like as it moves and grows.
We will absolutely do that.
Thank you all for this update. I echo a lot of the praise that my other board members have given. I think I'm really excited about the parent ambassadors. You're so right that parents are the ones, when they talk to each other, that can uplift and share their experiences with our school system. I think I also want to highlight Family Academy and the videos that you all did throughout the whole, while we were virtual, and I've seen a lot of those videos continue, right? And I think that having that on Facebook and that presence on Twitter has really allowed us to engage a lot more families. And so I think that is awesome, and I'm glad we're going to keep doing those. I think two questions that I have about this presentation, and one is just something for us to consider. I would love if we could have parents as a part of this working group as y'all are working. I know that can be challenging with schedules, but we want to make sure that we're providing the opportunities for families to give that feedback. And I want to make sure that we're looking at that really holistically. So sometimes there are families that might be easier to tap, or parents that are easier to tap for opportunities. And I want us to look for the folks that maybe don't always get that opportunity to bring to the table. And when we think about communication, how are we thinking about that for those families as well? So for some folks, a robocall is great, or the email, but for some families, the text. And I think the app will be a better option. An app you might not even sell service for. You might be able to get on Wi-Fi and be able to do some of that communication. So I think that will also be able to really support some of our families that may not have access to the same materials that others do. I think my other question, we can save this for the next strategic plan, is we using teacher working condition survey data for this, but I wonder if there's a way that we could evaluate community perception. I think we all have our quantitative data on what that means, but I wonder if there's another way that we can consider that as we're moving forward to add as another data point for this.
I think that that's a very important conversation for us to have as we are in discussions with how to put together the next strategic plan. The resources that we have for like broad quantitative polling are limited. At the time that the plan was being developed, there were questions about, I know that the city county the county does a public opinion poll about the broader county. That includes some questions about Durham Public Schools, but we don't have a lot of input in that. So there was some reluctance to go there in 2018. But we absolutely have to, we did what we did with the tools that we had available to us. We've got some time to really consider some better tools.
Mr. Lee?
Just really quickly on that, I seem to remember about 6 years ago, I thought we had a community perception, something done like that. It was an external company that we brought in to survey the entire county about Durham Public Schools, like that sort of thing. We may want to look back. And
It may have been
it was under Dr.
TNTP or something like that.
Something like that. It was a while ago. That may serve as a baseline if we go into another survey like that. Okay.
Go back to that.
Yeah, so that may serve as a baseline and see where we've changed. I believe seeing something like that. Thank you, Dr. Danner, for that reminder. But thank you all for this. I always appreciate, you all know that I always appreciate strategic plan updates. This is, like Matt said, this is what the community asked for. This is what we got. If you want to see where the district's going or how we're doing in this plan, you can see it. It's all online, the updates and so forth. So that's, again, I just wanted to say thank you, but also I think we have that baseline for community perceptions, DPS.
I appreciate you saying that. And, this is probably ingratiating myself to the boss a little bit, but this is why this was the mission that you gave him when you brought Dr. Mabinga to us, and he threw himself into it with gusto, with a important listening and learning tour of our community, putting together the group. And he and Dr. Hardy and all of us in leadership positions on the strategic plan have been working the plan very, very hard.
Ms. Byer?
Thank you all. I do want to thank you all for the work that you've done on this incredibly critical part. Our parents and families are our partners. And even during the pandemic, you all have found new ways to bring that partnership in and strengthen that. And, I look forward to the ways that we're going to continue to use the technology, but I also know that our folks are longing for that face-to-face connection and to be back in the buildings, to see the students writing and artwork on the walls, to actually come into media centers, to come into plays and things. So it is my earnest hope that we could envision a safe enough setting for that in the coming academic year and reassure families that that is what we want back together. We'll all strive towards that. We've definitely had conversations with realtors who love the relationship and the expansion of our investment in y'all's work. And I want to make sure y'all hear that feedback. If folks want this Spark magazine, where would they find it and where is it shared?
That Spark magazine will be online, but it is a partnership between us and Durham Magazine. The magazine is itself an insert in Durham Magazine. If you could. Here's their cover, and here's our cover. So that is made available for everybody who is a subscriber or who picks up a copy of Durham Magazine. And then we will have the previous issue and the current issue together as a standalone publication available for our families later in the year.
Fantastic. Thank you, Mr. Shutters. And I noticed changes to the website. I didn't hear you talking about that, but I thought this might be a good opportunity for y'all to talk about how that looks different to folks.
The website does look different. We have applied a new template that will be rolling out to all of our schools over the next month or so. It is more attractive. It is also more ADA compliant in and of itself, and we're going to be able to do more with that to ensure that going forward. So over the summer, we're also going to be doing some reorganization and streamlining, so it'll be easier for people to find things, but it is currently much easier to read and much more attractive, and it's also going to be the backbone for the app.
Thank you. And I'm excited about the DPS Family and Community Engagement Team. I'm excited that you all are going to kind of more formally collaborate your work. I know what you all will be wrestling with is what all of our schools and staff wrestle with is not how to reach the parents we already reach, but how to reach the ones that we're not reaching. And I look forward to y'all kind of being in space together and really innovating in that way. I do have to say, I'm still kind of back in public comment and wanting to acknowledge to those folks that came here, and those are our parents and families and students, that we've got work to do in that space as well. And I look forward to kind of ways that we can hear those concerns and acknowledge improvements within Durham Public Schools. So I just personally am just still reflecting on the profound comments that were brought here tonight. But thank you all for this presentation and the updates.
If there are no further comments, I'll just say that I'm impressed. I think the synergy, and Ms. Byer already kind of commented on it when we're looking at the community engagement team. I think the synergy that you all are creating is going to essentially be more efficient, which makes you all more effective, and it benefits the community much more. So thank you for that. The one thing, because you always want to be able to have somebody critique something. So I tried to find any problem that I could, and I couldn't find one, but I did have a question. And I think this is something that could come up down the road. One of the metrics deals with annual benchmarks of two-way communication. And I'm just wondering if you could shed some light on, is that like communication going to be based upon the school? Is this communication with the district? Because if we're hearing from community members and residents that they feel like they're not being heard, and we point to this metric, can you kind of put the connotation of how that should be received, or how that's actually being communicated with what that metric really tracks?
The metric is based on the perception of school two-way communication. We have strategies in all of our strategic plan goals that go beyond the specific benchmark and go towards the whole principle of the thing. So we are not actively tracking, as part of these benchmarks, our efforts in improving two-way communication at the district level, for example. However, we've done some incredible things in the last year with the Growing Together project and things like that. The equity policy work and the community engagement that was required for that. We have examples. So systematically addressing that as part of the next strategic plan is important to us.
Thank you. And thank you all for all your work. Now, this was up for information, so there was nothing else that needed to be done. So we'll thank you and your team again.
Thank you. And thank you to all of my goal team members who are here tonight.
All right. The next item on our agenda is going to be the Academic Services 2022 School Library Month.
Thank you, Mr. Raven, Chair Umstead, and board members. Dr. Mabinga would like to invite Dr. Catalano, Executive Director for K-12 Curriculum and Instruction, for us to discuss and celebrate School Library Month.
Thank you, Dr. Hardy. Good evening, Chair Umstead, Vice Chair Lewis, Dr. Mabinga, and members of the board. So April is School Library Month, and this particular week is School Library Week. So we would like to take this opportunity to thank our media coordinators and our library staff that work in Durham Public Schools as we present you this proclamation for School Library Month. Libraries are integral to school success. They're valuable resources for both print and digital resources to support academics. They're spaces where students can explore new topics, ask questions, and feel a sense of belonging. They're places where students in Durham see themselves reflected in stories and enter into new worlds. We continue to work to provide students opportunities to access the best books and digital tools in our libraries and media centers, and we continue our partnership with Durham County Library System through Bull City Slam, providing them access to resources from our library system as well. In Durham, we're committed to supporting our school libraries for our student success and excited to celebrate this month with our proclamation today and celebration of our Battle of the Books winners, which are coordinated by our librarians, as our media coordinators as well, next month or at our next meeting on April 21st. We ask that you sign this proclamation and approve it in support of celebrating April as School Library Month. Thank you.
Thank you. And the administration is requesting the reading and approval of the proclamation. So we can go ahead and start with Ms. Valladares, if you
Yes.
already have it up.
Yes. So proclamation, School Library Month, April 2022. Whereas the school library is to ensure that students and staff are effective users of ideas and information, and
Whereas the school librarian's role is to provide the leadership and expertise necessary to ensure that the school library is an integral part of the instructional program of the school. And
whereas the Board of Education has entrusted the school library in each school to teach the skills of locating and using information through traditional resources and new technologies, to provide literature appreciation activities, and to guide and encourage content and recreational reading to every student. And
whereas lifelong learning begins and is systemically developed through the school library curriculum of the elementary and secondary schools. And
whereas the school library contributes to the individual growth and development of all students while fostering both excellence and equity in education. And
Whereas the school librarians of Durham Public Schools have dedicated themselves to work for quality school libraries for all students.
Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Board of Education of Durham Public Schools does hereby proclaim April 2022 as School Library Month and calls upon school administrators, teachers, students, and citizens of Durham County to recognize and support this action and to participate throughout the month of April in celebration of School Library Month.
all right, Ms. Byer.
I love this proclamation. I would just request that the last whereas therefore, can we change that citizens to residents to be more reflective of our community? I think that's better language there.
All right, any other comments or discussion on the proclamation?
I would move that we move the proclamation for School Library Month as amended.
second. We all second.
It has been moved and properly seconded multiple times to accept the proclamation as amended, and we'll go ahead and go with the vote if there's no discussion. All right, Ms. Valladares,
I vote aye.
Ms. Byer,
Aye.
Ms. Umstead,
Aye.
Ms. Lewis,
Aye.
Mr. Lee,
Aye.
Mr. Sears.
Aye.
My name is Frederick. I vote aye as well. It is approved unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. At this point, we will move to the summary of the follow-up items. Dr. Hardy?
All right, I don't know why I have unreadiness, except that we are making changes in masking, and I didn't know if our staff wanted to make any comments on the plans for that for the 11th or not. And so I know that's not on the agenda, but I didn't notice it until we got to the end of the agenda. Yeah. And I've seen some emails internally, and I don't know if those communications have been shared with families, and I appreciate the work that you all have done. Is there anything that y'all need to share, or will updates be going out to folks? And yeah.
I'm going to pass it on to Dr. Hardy to share the communication that has been shared with all our staff as well as our families. So based on your votes of the last board meeting, we've been working accordingly to make sure that we proceed and we'll be ready for mask recommended on April 11th. Anything else, Dr. Hardy?
Thank you, Dr. Mabinga. And we, board members, you did receive the communication that has been shared internally with staff and families regarding protocols and procedures for masks recommended beginning on April 11th. We also had a conversation with our principals yesterday afternoon to ensure that there were no additional items that they needed so that they could ensure that our students and staff were in safe spaces when they come on Monday, April 11th for masks recommended. Mr. Sutters, did you have anything you needed to add?
I thought it would be appropriate for me to briefly read the email that we sent to staff, and we will, no, okay. Oh, Dr. Mabinga wants us to move on, but we have encouraged our staff to be mindful of and supportive of each other at this difficult time.
I would like also to add that we have enough PPE, KN95, that any of our staff members will need those additional protections. We have them available at their schools. Thank you.
Any other comments or discussion from the board? Dr. Hardy, is that I guess the totality of your follow-up items? I'm sorry.
Oh, I didn't even start my follow-up items. I apologize. I was thinking about COVID protocols. Couple of follow-up items to make sure. One request is to invite parents to be part of some of our priority goal teams, to continue to grapple with our communication with families, explicitly making sure that we're reaching out to families who may not be as connected with our schools and our district. Mentioned from Mr. Lee regarding community perception data. We think about 6 years ago from TNTP that can serve as a baseline. And for us to think about community survey data as we are beginning to think about the next round of our strategic plan.
Okay, so that brings us to the closed session. So I would welcome a motion if there's nothing else.
I move we go into closed session for the reasons stated on the agenda.
A second.
It's been moved by Mr. Lee, seconded by Ms. Umstead. We will go with the roll call vote if there's no discussion. All right, Ms. Valladares,
I vote aye.
Ms. Byer,
Aye.
Ms. Umstead,
Aye.
Ms. Lewis, Mr. Lee,
Aye.
Mr. Sears.
Aye.
My name is Frederick. I vote aye as well. It passes unanimously. Thank you.
We are now back in open session. Dr. Mabenga.
Madam Chair, I'm here to seek your approval for the personnel report as discussed at the closed session.
Move approval of the personnel report dated April 7th, 2022.
Second.
Been moved by Ms. Byer, seconded by Mr. Raven. Any other discussion? We'll do a roll call vote. Ms. Valladares,
I vote aye.
Ms. Byer,
Aye.
Mr. Raven,
Aye.
Mr. Sears,
Aye.
Mr. Lee,
No.
and I vote aye. So it passes 5-1. And with that, we are adjourned.